it was a long flight, and they had movies playing the whole time, and so it was like, all right, read my scriptures, looking down, or sleep, take a nap. But I was like set on, I'm gonna be able to get rid of jet lag really quick, and so I was trying to time it just right so I'd fall asleep on the plane at the right time. Anyways, I was very tired when I arrived and met the mission president. I initially started in the Korea Seoul mission, and when I got there, I got to meet President Christensen and his wife and our APs and the office elders. Loaded all our suitcases up, and then they gave us Book of Mormons. And we're at the airport, and the mission home where we were going to was by the temple in Korea, good distance away. So we all jumped on the subway, and they said, go talk to someone on the train. And we all did not speak Korean. Some of us had more words than others, and I was more of the one who was like, I'll just kind of put it in their hands, and they'll just accept the Book of Mormon, and I'll just Ikujuseo, which is like, will you read this? I figured that would be enough. So I was walking with my MTC companion through the subway, going from car to car, and we don't know how to ask for phone numbers very well or anything. We're doing like the Lord's work, and it was just working out, and we met quite a few people that day. Went to a restaurant right off the bat with the mission president and the other missionaries who came in. I had kimchi jjigae. It's kind of spicy. Has kimchi in it. It's a soup. And I was terrible at using chopsticks. Absolutely terrible. I was dropping food left and right. And so then as soon as the mission president said, well, does anyone want to do interviews tonight? I was the first person to raise my hand because I didn't want to keep using the chopsticks that day. Went up, did my interview with the mission president, and then we slept at the building right next to the temple, the little annex. And so that was a pretty cool experience, because the next morning you wake up and there's the temple, and you just arrived from another country and you're like, I didn't know this was right here when I went to sleep. But my first area was called Songnam, and it's not the rich neighborhood, and so walking down the streets there was some just smells that would like hit you all of a sudden. You're like, I don't know that smell, it's part of Korea. And that happened throughout my whole mission. Walk by and it's like, ooh, I caught a whiff of something that I don't know what it is, whether it was good or bad. And my trainer, I was told by so many people he's the best at Korean, and I was like, all right. I was pretty excited about this. I'm going to learn Korean really fast then. But when he was so good at Korean, I didn't learn as fast because I would rely on him so much. We had a great ward, very closely knit, and we kind of started off with 2 investigators, and that slowly became 0, and then we had to build from that. But the real work was through the members of the ward, talking to them and getting to know the culture. So there are missionaries who go out and they're very picky with food. My best recommendation, if you want to enjoy the food culture of the mission, is try everything. If you're allergic, that's one thing, but if you're not, try it. You gotta try it at least once. If you don't like it after that, order something different. But foods that are pretty common: kimchi jjigae, which is kimchi soup; om rice, which is like a egg omelet with rice inside of it and some ketchup over the top of it, and some sesame seeds if you're lucky. Donkasu, that's fried pork cutlet. It's more common in Japan, but there's a Korean version of it that's more cooked and is really good. Come in cheese, pizza, donkasu. There's just so many different varieties of that. There's something called sundaeguk. I had a lot of companions who didn't like sundaeguk, but I did. It's a soup with intestine in it, filled with like some noodles, and it's just so good. I mean, you look at it the first time and you go, I'm not eating that. But then if you have the attitude like me, you're like, I'm gonna at least eat that once, and if I don't like it, I'll be able to avoid it next time. And I just liked it, and I was like, oh, this is great. One of my favorite dishes. A lot of people are not super happy with my choice of favorite dish, but I like boshintang, which is dog meat soup. Obviously, I have not had it outside of Korea, and the dogs are specifically bred for eating. So it's just like raising a chicken. You eat the chicken, and it's not a pet. Most comparably to really tender roast beef. So I had that a lot. And with every meal in Korea, you have what's called pansan, or side dishes. So you'd have your little dish of kimchi, mu, which is radish and vinegar, maybe onions or bean sprouts, or a few other different things. And that's all communal. So you have your chopsticks and you reach across the table, you get some of that. If you want water, you have a cup that's this big, and that's usually all the water you drink for the whole meal by the end of your mission, because you just developed that culture. But you just reach across the table in front of someone while they're eating, you give the stuff, and it's not considered rude. You don't tip. I don't know why we tip in America, but I had it told to me once by a Korean guy who's a little older than me. He said, if you tip, it's like saying, go get cooking lessons. And so if you don't tip and you just say it was so good, they want you to come back and eat more, or things like that. A very, very cool place to go is called a gogi buffet. And gogi is meat, so it's an all-you-can-eat meat buffet. You have your table. There's like a pan about this big set into the table, and it heats up like in a skillet, and you cook samgyeopsal, origogi, samgyeopsal is like really thick bacon, I guess pork belly. Origogi is duck. You have chicken, other meats, lamb, and you would cook it right in front of you to however well done you want it. And then you always have scissors with meals too, so you'd pick them up and you cut it with scissors, and then you just take from there. You had your little bowl of rice, and you'd eat with rice, and you would have like lettuce, and you'd put your meat in it, some rice, a little bit of sauce, and you'd put it all like in the thing, you'd hold it, and you'd put it all in your mouth in one bite, and you just kind of like chew it until it's gone. That's the food culture. I started in Seongnam, then I went to a place called Gimpo, which is more towards the north end of our mission, and because I had split into the Seoul South mission with President and Sister Maurice. So my third area was Gangnam, like the dance, Gangnam style. So I was there, and then my last area was Bundang. And as you continue in the mission, you get to learn more about the culture, of course, and you understand the conversations that are going on. And I got to learn about Kim Ho-jik. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he was the first Korean who was baptized from Korea. And so I met his daughter when I was serving in Gangnam. It was pretty cool to read the story. There was a book entitled Feed My Sheep, and it talks about the missionary work that went on in Korea, like from the very beginning, closer to present day. As far as church history, I think that would be a great book to really understand church history in Korea. There was a old church movie that talked about different missions and talked about Africa, Hong Kong, and Korea was one of them, and it talks a lot about Kim Ho-jik in that. There's 4 missions in Korea. You have the Seoul mission, the Seoul South mission, the Daejeon mission, and Busan mission. And Busan and Daejeon are more countryside, is what I kind of was feeling, and Seoul and Seoul South were more city or seemed more developed. I had never lived in a city before my mission, and so going out there, it was a very new experience. The church growth is, I would say, pretty steady. We did a lot of work with less actives. Area to area, the ward size really varied. I mean, you could have a ward where every Sunday around 60 people came, to a ward where you had about 180 come every week. So it varied pretty drastically. Korea is like the Bible Belt of Asia. It has so many Christian churches. And oh man, there's so many stories where you're walking down the street and there's missionaries from another church saying, "Oh no, you're wrong, let me explain why." And we're just like, "Oh, have you read the Book of Mormon? How about you read this first and then we'll talk?" And so there's a lot of Christianity. There is Buddhism, and I'm sure there are other things as well, but those are the 2 that kind of stick out. There's a lot of pull in churches. So if your friends go to this church and you don't, eventually you'll be going to that church, is kind of the feel. A lot of people, I think, not only Korea but across the world, think Mormons, oh, cult, and that happened a lot in Korea, and we were like, oh, well, what do you know about us? And they're like, oh, well, not much actually. Oh, okay, so can we talk? And we'd usually be able to talk and get a good conversation going through that. Then they'd be able to see that we're normal people, and there were a few times that the people, they were so ingrained in the church, they would wonder why we were out here. And I said, well, do you really expect me to come, halfway around the world to tell a lie? And I think that would, get a few people, because they were like, oh, well, you're right, you probably wouldn't. I mean, it's expensive. So a big thing in Korea is drinking. I had so many people on my mission tell me, a meeting isn't a meeting unless you're drinking with the boss. And I was like, what happens if you don't drink? Oh, well, you don't get promoted, you won't get to you won't do well in the company, and you'll probably get fired eventually. And I was like, well, that doesn't sound good. Well, we have the word of wisdom here, and if you would like to get baptized and follow Jesus Christ, you need to be able to give up alcohol. And there were a few times that it was like, I gotta keep my job. I'm sorry, I can't do it now. Maybe later when I'm higher up in the company. And so we lost a few investigators that way, but a lot of them, they showed a lot of faith and okay, I can give it up. I had one guy, because I never knew that green tea or black tea, we didn't label it here in the States when we learn about the word of wisdom, but we have to specifically tell them, no green tea or black tea or alcohol, and go through the word of wisdom like that. And I had investigators, they bring a backpack with them or something, and they say, oh, so this is not allowed, and they pull out green tea, and I'm like, oh, no, it's not. And I had a few of them just throw it in a trash can, and I was like, all right, I can take that trash out so then no one in the church thinks that we were drinking green tea. But yeah, you had extremes with that. I think Sabbath day observance is another tough one, because the people of Korea are some of the hardest working people I've met. They have a mentality to just get things done, do it right, and then move on to the next thing very efficiently. So when you say, yeah, the Sabbath day is a day of rest. If they don't have the Christian background, or with another church they've been with, they don't necessarily have to go every week. They really feel pressure from that. They call it budam. It's kind of like bad pressure. I don't think there's an exact translation for it, but Sabbath day observance is a tough one, I would say. I would say those are the two biggest ones that I ran into. Other than those, I think that the people of Korea are very open to the message of the restoration of the gospel. Well, I served, as you said, in Gangnam. That's a pretty famous place, especially here in the States with the song Gangnam Style that came out. And when I got there, I was expecting it to be like the music video, you know, like full of the energy and, you know, actors, actresses, and pop culture. Well, the whole of Gangnam isn't like that. It's maybe 2 or 3 streets that are all really close together, and it's like a big shopping area. Very tourist centered, and so it was interesting to see that what I had previously thought about Gangnam was wrong, and that it was so much more diverse. And Korea has tons of hills, and they're not like rolling hills. They're steep, and all your roads are on these really steep hills. And invest in a good pair of shoes, because you will walk a lot. Some cool things: there was a tunnel in Gangnam that between the hours of 10 till 4 or 5 in the morning, you could go and spray paint. I never got to go, of course, but so we'd go there every once in a while, you know, on a P day, and we were walking by. We're like, let's just stop by here, because as a missionary, you want to work as hard as you can, but you do have to be able to say, okay, we need to take a breather for 5 minutes while we gather our thoughts, and then say, okay, we're going here. So we would walk down this tunnel and see all these cool artwork, different graffiti that people had done. We would always put a smile on our face and be like, oh, all right, let's go find these people. So that was a cool area. I was there during the summertime, and Korea is very humid. You walk outside, and at least for me, had bullets of sweat coming down almost instantly. And I wasn't there during winter. Winter, I was in some other areas, and that's pretty bitter cold. I've had a smile frozen to my face before with a companion. We were both walking around, and the wind was so bad that we had red faces and just smiles stuck to our face. And he goes, man, your smile is the only thing keeping me smiling. And I said, well, I can't move. So the weather's very extreme. Most of the people in Gangnam are business people. I know you've probably heard of LG. So I talked with one of my companions. We taught a guy who was so he was like right under the vice president. So you had the CEO president of LG, and then you had the vice president, and then you had this guy who lived in Gangnam. And we met with him 3 times, and you know, we didn't get very far with him, but we learned a lot more about the culture of Gangnam from him, because he said, you know, the people here, they aren't too worried about money. They're very busy. He said, if you want to like meet with people, which is funny, because he said he didn't really want to help us, but he would help us on our life goals and path if we wanted. And I was like, oh, like in 2 years, let me talk to you. But he explained that people are always busy, and they're really not. They have all these open areas. They just don't want to schedule them. And he said, so what you have to do is you walk up to someone and say, hey, like, you start talking to them and you want to meet with them, and they tell you they're busy. So then you pick a date 2 days later, and you say, at this time, a specific time, and they say, okay, I can make that time, or they say, well, I can't make that time, but I can make it this time. So you have to be very forward with an exact day and time, I would say. And that really got to the business class. Having sister missionaries is a big deal in Korea because there are very few opportunities to teach men during the day. And so you're proselyting a lot more or finding service activities. It's more of a male-dominated society. And the men go to work. A lot of the females go to work as well, but mostly they're at home. And so sister missionaries are able to meet with them, and we proselyte on the street to everyone, talk to everyone. A lot of the housing is apartment style or villa styled, or villa. I guess it would be villa in English. The houses are small, and it's because you're really not at your house more than, a short time to sleep, maybe have dinner, and then you're out at work again. So it's different in that aspect. As far as Gangnam and how it's famous and that song came about, Psy, he had been writing music before about government and other, not controversial topics, but just other topics. And he decided to make one about Gangnam. And a fun fact is there's a part in the music video where he's entering the subway and this girl is dancing really quick on the subway, and then they're like getting closer and it's like fading in and out, and then it like pauses, and then he's with her for the rest of the music video, and her name is Hyuna, and she's another artist who had just gotten pretty big with a song around that time. And so he said, hey, will you jump in my music video with me so that I guess I can get more views, more popularity. I heard it a few times, not in Gangnam. In fact, in Korea, every street, you're walking down it and you'll hear songs. Like popular American songs that have just come out, and you don't really pay attention to them, but then the new missionary is with you and they're like, oh, have you heard this song? And I'm like, no, I've never heard this song actually. And they're like, oh, it just came out. It's like, oh, okay, cool. So we'd hear music all the time. If you can keep up with pop culture, you can get into the hearts of a lot of the younger generation or those closer to your age, and they're more like, oh yeah, I want to be your friend. And if you're the same age as someone, you have an immediate in, because that's a part of the culture. You have this society where if you're the same age, you're donggap, your same group, and you're automatically friends. But if someone's older than you, you don't call them your friend, you call them your older brother or older sister, and if they're younger than you, they call you that. So it's not that you can't be friends, it's just they consider friends same age. They're healthy, and a lot of them, I would say, aren't too worried about what other people think. For example, working out in the street, not like in the actual street, but like on the sidewalk, is a common thing that I saw. You'd see an older person, waiting for a light, and instead of just standing there waiting, they're doing push-ups on a bench. And I was just like, well, okay, like, I'll join you next time. So they're very healthy. They have a lot of those type of parks where you can work out at. I know that's stereotypical. A lot of people think Asians, they're smart at math and science, and it's true. And I think it's because their schooling trains them to get the right answer. Calculators, I'm sure they wish they could use them, but they don't. I mean, even like elementary, middle school, like you have these complex problems and you're doing it on paper and in your head. And so one time I got to help a girl who I was home teaching her, or not home teaching, I was teaching her uncle, but then teaching them English at the same time. And one day I just realized she was very worried about something and busy, and I was like, whoa, what is it? Can I help? And she goes, pulls over her math book, and I look at it and I go, I can do math, but this is in Korean. Let me see what I can do. And I'm walking through it, and then finally she goes, oh, you're too slow, and then just does it. And I was like, I guess I gave you the motivation to get it done, right? So they're very good at that. As far as education, they like to go to school, and it's not like public schools here where you go to school and you get home and you mess around for an hour or two, do a little bit of homework, and then you go hang out with more friends or family. It's you go to school, then after school you go to academies that are teaching martial arts, music, more math, magic, and you go and you learn more and more. And I knew kids who would go to school early in the morning, like 6 or 7, they're at school, and then they'd get home at about 10 at night, and they were doing stuff the whole time, just scheduled out. So I think that's where a lot of their work ethic comes from, because they're just forced to do so much. They're always wearing their uniforms, which is funny because you can tell what grade or what school people go to because they're walking down the street with all their friends and they're all wearing the exact same thing. And they all have their names embroidered right here. And so you have your missionary name tag and they have their names, and you're walking by and you're like, oh, that kid looks like he's the cool kid of the crowd. And I just say the name. I was like, oh, how you doing? And they're like, I don't know you. And then they notice my name tag and they're like, oh, I'm doing good, so and so. And then people are like, oh, these white people? Let's go talk to them as a group. So they stick together as far as their age groups go. And yeah, Koreans are probably also the nicest people I've met. I feel like sometimes if people are learning English, other people aren't as nice to them, and if they don't speak it well enough, they're like, come on, learn English. You're in America. But when you're going over there and you're learning Korean, and it's not an easy language. It's difficult, but achievable. And the people there are so kind. They want to help you learn Korean. They see you're struggling, and they probably understand what you're trying to say, and they'll maybe help you out with some words, or you bring around a little notebook with words that you're trying to learn, and you use it to try and get a conversation started about the church. You're like, oh, will you help me pronounce this word right here? And they're like, oh, you say it like this. And then you're like, oh, okay. And then you pretend like you go back to studying. And they see another word on there. It's like missionary or church or something like that. And they're like, so why are you learning Korean? Oh, actually, I'm glad you asked. Let me put this away. This is really why I want to get you to help me with that. But they're super kind, hardworking, like I said. They're very open to the Spirit. They're very in tune with it, I would say. And a lot of them can feel it, and they notice a difference when you're talking with them and when you're not there. There's not really a personal space bounds. People can be right up next to you and still be fine. They had very good public transportation, and sometimes you just didn't want to get on the subway in the morning because everyone was going to work. And as a missionary, you feel a little uncomfortable just being up against everyone else. And we always carried around our Book of Mormon, so I'm just holding the Book of Mormon, and I'm like, man, I really hope that not a lot of people get on and more people get on the subway and you just kind of crowd in, and so there's no personal space really. They have 2 really great holidays. There's one called Chuseok, which is about comparative to Thanksgiving. It's their harvest one. And Solar, which is more February time frame, and that is New Year's. You go and see your family for that. There's a part where you bow a specific way, you get on this knee and then that knee, and you bow down with your hands like on the ground, and then your elders or your uncle or something, they pay you money for your bow. You eat a lot of really good food around that time. Those two are probably the biggest. Wash and wear pants. I wish I may have brought 1 or 2 more pairs. I would not wear khakis, because now that you're allowed to wear khakis, with the humidity, it just kind of, sweat stains show up. Bring lots of socks. They're comfortable. Very comfortable shoes. I recommend something that's high top, even if it's not slip on, because the amount of walking you do, you burn through the soles of your shoes. I went through 3 pairs of shoes on my mission. Even had one of those pairs repaired at a side shop once or twice. Don't worry so much about bringing ties. Bring maybe, I don't know, 6 to 8, I think is what it says, and that's plenty, because you'll buy like a tie on the street for $1 and you'll be so happy that you'll wear it 2 days in a row. And so don't worry too much about ties. Bring like a bleach stick, because your white shirts won't stay white very long during the summer. I would bring more short sleeve shirts. There was a King Sejong, and he sent out lots of scholars. This is how I was told. They sent out lots of scholars to around the world, and they were supposed to learn about different languages and then come back. Because prior to this, it was very Chinese based, the characters, and there was a problem with literacy, because if you didn't know characters or weren't a scholar, then you were uneducated and would be a farmer or just a worker. And he wanted to help develop a language that everyone could learn and everyone would be able to read and write it. So I don't know how true it is, but apparently the different parts of the Korean alphabet, the Hangul, are the way your mouth forms and the way your tongue like touches the roof of your mouth and stuff like that. And it's interesting to look at, because I would agree it's somewhat, you look at the characters and you're like, oh yeah, like that's that. So it's a language you can read. It's not memorized characters. You can sound something out without knowing what it means. They have their vowels and their consonants, and they put them together and then it looks like a character from then. They have a lot of sounds that are similar to the English letters, but they can't pronounce R's very well and they can't pronounce L's very well, because they have something called a R, and it's in between. They have another part of the language which is subject, object, verb, and they will put these little markers on the subject and object, not always, but some of the time. And one of them is like, for the objects, it's or let's see, umshik is food, so umshik. So that on the end is just saying that this is the object of the sentence. Then if it doesn't have a bottom syllable, and then it would be re, which is just a real with an and then another real. So that's an interesting sound. Some of the vowels sound weird. So you'll have, there's a character called a digit. It's like the D sound, but then you can say dwe, de. There's a few different ways to say like this character with different diphthongs, and it's a completely different meaning, but it sounds almost identical. You don't say you. You can. It's very informal, so there's different speech levels in Korean. The two that missionaries will know of will be 존댓말, which is high form, and 반말, which is half talk or low form. And sometimes people say, oh, there's middle form, which is just ending in yo, but that is a part of 존댓말, which is the higher honorific stuff. It's just more casual. A common phrase is 안녕하세요, and that's just good morning, good evening, how are you? It really translates to, is your soul at peace? I don't know if you've ever noticed, but you're talking to your friends or you see your friend and you say, how are you doing? And they say, how are you doing? And then they just keep walking. You never answer each other's question, but it's kind of how we've learned to say hello now. But that you can say 안녕, which is 반말 or low form, 안녕하세요, which is middle form, still 존댓말, but what missionaries will consider middle form, and then 안녕하십니까, which is higher form. And I think there's king form, which I didn't really learn a lot, but I think it was like 안녕하시오 or something along that line. I don't know, people are probably going to be laughing at me going, you're messing up your Korean. But some people, they don't lose their accent, and so that's sometimes funny to hear. They're like, 안녕하세요, 저는 유타주 에이스 왔습니다, and you're just like, oh my goodness, like you're saying the things right, but it doesn't sound right. And then I'm not perfect at it at all, but it would be more like 안녕하세요, 저는 한국에 봉사하면서 재미있게 봉사했습니다, or something like that. And you just kind of go more fluid. In America, we like to have lots of expression in our face, and we talk with a wider mouth, and Korea is very more closed mouth, and I don't know how sometimes they can get the sound to like really be so full. Like when I was trying to get more Korean sounding, I had a very closed mouth and I would sound quiet. So there's sound changes that sometimes don't make sense, and you're just like, I don't know why the M sound going to that sound is going to be like an N sound instead, and you're like, oh, okay. The sound I was talking about earlier, the real, the RL, the combination, if that is followed by another one and in the same, if that character, the next character is also, it makes an L sound. So it'll be like instead of walking up to a guy, I'll ask him maybe if he's interested in English. So 안녕하세요. 혹시 어디 가시는 길 되세요? And then the person would say something like, oh, I'm going that way or whatnot. And I go, 저는 예수 그리스도 후기 성도 교회 선교사입니다. 저희가 행복한 메시지 나누고 싶은데요. And then if they're like not really interested, we would tend to say, oh, well, like, are you interested in learning about English? And so we'd say, 그러면 영국 관심 있으세요? And then they're like, oh, I'm a little interested in that. And we talk to them about our English class and go from there. So they have two different forms of counting. One is for important stuff and one is for unimportant stuff. That's how I was told. But you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. The only reason that was kind of hard for me is I sometimes think I'm going to say it in Chinese because that's based off the Chinese characters of it. And the other way is 하나, 둘, 셋, 넷, 다섯, 여섯, 일곱, 여덟, 아홉, 열, 열하나, 열둘, 열셋, 열넷, 열다섯, 열여섯, 열일곱, 열여덟, 열아홉, 20. Yeah. Most different food I had was probably boshintang, the dog meat soup, because you can't have that here in the United States, and you know, it's a delicacy over there. You know, sometimes you'd be walking somewhere and a person would just start freaking out at you, saying like, oh, you're a cult, or you know, get up in your face. And I had one time a guy like grabbed me by my lapels, and he was telling me I didn't know what I was talking about and to go home, and I just said, sir, I need to cross the street. And a lot of these students were around me, and they were going, oh my goodness, like, this guy's crazy. And then after I'd walk away, they're like, are you alright? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine, thanks though. So that didn't have a lot of crazy things, but that was one of them. One day it was really hot, and the next day it was snowing. That was pretty crazy. I knew how to do dishes before my mission. Some missionaries don't. But I learned how to be like happy washing dishes or cleaning not only my stuff, but my companion or other housemates. So that was an important skill, because if you're doing that and you're kind of like begrudgingly cleaning up for them, you're not gonna really get much out of it, and you want it clean anyway. So if you have a good attitude about it, it's just even more enjoyable. Budgeting. I mean, you won't go hungry. Like, you're fine. You don't get fed by members like every night. I was with one companion, we got fed by members every night. I was with another companion where we got fed maybe every other week. But you write out the budget, and you can stay within that budget very easily. Some missionaries had impulse buys. Like, they'd be walking down the street and there's a street food and they're like, oh, I gotta try that. So budgeting is key, because you can budget in even those things like street food. You can say, all right, you know, this week I'm gonna say I get $12 for spending on street food, or maybe like an ice cream right before I go home at night because it's so hot. And if I meet my goal of talking to 60 people today, I'm gonna go buy a candy bar, things like that. You budget that in. So I think budgeting is a good skill that I learned. Having lots of investigators and appointments and whatnot, and then the next week, nothing. And you're like, did I do something wrong? Like, was I not praying enough? Have I not like been reading the right scriptures? How could I have helped those investigators more? And so you kind of beat yourself up about it a little bit. And I don't know, that was tough. One time I had 17 with my companion, and then we went down really quickly. I think we ended up with 3 the next week. So, you know, just that gaining and losing investigators kind of rapidly, that's kind of tough to deal with. That was hard. When you work hard, at least in Korea, sometimes you think of the word insanity, because you're doing almost the same thing every day and expecting a different result. And it's not that it was meaningless to do the same thing. It was good. We were getting the name of the church out there. We were getting to meet new people, potential investigators. But then later, you know, when you told the ward, hopefully we have 1 or 2 investigators show up at church today, and they're like, oh, okay, like, good. And no one shows up, and you're just going, oh man, like, what happened to our investigators? And we would just have miracles all the time. There was one time it was tough, and I was trying to think of all new ideas that we could try that no one else had tried, in order to find new investigators or visit less actives. And we thought people were coming to church, they didn't show up, and then we went up to a different class for the second hour, and then a member comes in and says, "Hey, I think one of your investigators here," and we get all excited, walk down, and we have no idea who the person is, and you know, he and his mom just wanted to learn more about the church, and mom wanted him to learn English, and it became a miracle, and he later got baptized. So I think that by hard work and patience, I saw the most spiritual experiences on my mission. One time, like I was talking about earlier about the like low form and high form, there was a guy in his probably 50s or 60s, so obviously he's my elder, I should use high form. And I said just a few sentences of low form, thinking I had said everything right. And he just started yelling at me because I wasn't respecting my elders, and I was just going, "Man, I really wish I knew what you were saying to me. I can just tell you're angry with me." I was pretty new, and so I guess I got by. But that was pretty interesting. Messing up saying a word, and then later you find out you accidentally swore at someone, and you're like, and you didn't tell them I was sorry, or things like that. Or colloquial things, like for example, to say I'm full, you say my stomach is singing, and the word excuse me, 실례합니다. And I thought that was like, oh, excuse me, like pardon me kind of thing. And one time I was on the subway and it was really packed, and I had to get off at the next stop, so I'm like trying to get through, and I'm like, 실례합니다, and no one's moving, and I'm just like, oh man, like maybe I gotta say it louder, I'm not saying it right. And a missionary bumps me, he goes, "Are you saying this?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh, no. That's like, excuse me, like if you burp or something like that." He's like, if you're wanting to get by someone, you say "잠깐만요," which is translate to one moment. So you're just walking by people going, one moment. And they're like just moving out of their way so you can get through. I got home and my dad goes, "Well, how are you going to pay for college?" And I said, "Well, I'll probably have to get a job." And he's like, "Okay." And so he recommended I get a job quickly. I ended up getting 2 full-time jobs fairly quickly, and just worked a lot because where I was from, you know, I had my friend group that I had, from moving around so much, I didn't know them really all that much, but I had a small friend group, and I was the first one to leave, which meant I was the first one back, meaning no one else my age was there. So I made work my life, and I worked, and if I didn't work, I was at home, you know, helping around the house. So keeping busy, but at the same time, before I left, you have your interview with your mission president, and he gave me this paper and said, you know, you got to write goals for all these different things, and short-term, long-term. How are you going to stay a missionary after your mission? So those goals, reading scriptures, exercising daily, you know, oh, I'm going to study the language for this much every single day after the mission, when in reality you get back and you're like, no one speaks this language, how am I going to like keep it up? And you know, you find ways to do stuff like that. So set goals on the mission for after the mission and stick to them. So have fun, stay busy, and keep to your goals. Maybe find something to learn. A lot of people refer to it as my mission. And it's true, it's my mission. But as soon as I learned that it was the Lord's mission, I just had a new aspect on everything. I knew that everything would be done in the Lord's time and by the Spirit. I believe in the gift of tongues. Without it, you know, I can stumble through as many sentences as I want, but with the gift of tongues and speaking with the Spirit, you know, you meet so many people that are prepared to hear this message of the restored gospel. I know the Book of Mormon is true. And because of that testimony, I was able to stand firm, knowing that it was true. And when I told someone it was true, they could see in my eyes and how I said it that I was the real deal. I know that the Lord blesses His missionaries, that He strengthens you in the hard times and guides you every step of the way. And there's lots of reasons to serve missions, and you need to know your reason. Through that reason, let it be your motivation, your drive, so that you can develop Christ-like attributes and become who God wants you to be. I have a testimony of this church. I have a testimony of Joseph Smith in the first vision, how it happened, and how the church was restored through Joseph Smith. I have a testimony of modern day prophets, of priesthood. I have a strong testimony of prayer. I have a very strong testimony that's close to my heart of the atonement of Jesus Christ. And I share that with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
I arrived in Korea and went to the mission home. That was our first day. We arrived at the mission home at like 9 o'clock at night. And we had interviews with the president and went to bed. Slept in my first morning. But I don't think president minded too much. I think all of us were pretty jet lagged. And I got my trainer that day. She was a Korean. Her name was Sister Pak, and we served together for the next 10 weeks in an area out in Incheon, and she was great. I learned a lot from her about patience and a lot about how to do missionary work and how to be an effective missionary. I feel like we learned a lot from each other. Her area was a bit of a harder area, and we tried to work together in order to do that, but she spoke English fairly well, and I spoke Korean very poorly at this point, but we somehow made it work. We somehow communicated well, and yeah, I don't know, my very first week in the field, I just remember going out on the streets like all day long, every single day. We do it's called jando in Korean, proselyting. I don't really know what you call it in English, but so whenever we did jando, it was just hour after hour, we would be on the street corners and just talking to people, and it was really hard. Probably my first several transfers was very difficult to talk to people because I'm at heart a very shy person and don't really like to get out and talk to people. But I was out on the streets, and my trainer would be like, just go up and say hello, ask them what religion they are. I'm like, and it was just step by step trying to get over that fear of talking to people, because I wasn't very comfortable doing that. But she was great in helping me to start to overcome that. I didn't quite get over that till several months later, and I started finally being able to be comfortable to just walk up to a person and say like, hey, how's it going? I'm a missionary. Have you heard about this church? And most people would be like, no, I don't want religion. But I don't know, it was a very good learning experience. But I have to say, probably the hardest part about probably my first 2 transfers as a greenie was probably the language. The language, Korean, is very difficult, and even now I still don't think I don't fully know it. I can teach the gospel. I could do my calling as a missionary, but I can't do much else outside of that. But the language is probably the hardest. But also through that, I saw so many blessings and so many miracles as the Lord helped me to remember things and to help me to become the missionary that later I was able to become. I started my mission in the Seoul mission. That's where I got my call to. But about 4 months into my mission, I got transferred to the Seoul South mission because of all the new missions that were created. And so I'll talk mostly about the Seoul South mission because that's the one I know the best. So in the Seoul South mission, there are 6 zones, and it's a very small mission. It takes about 2.5 hours by subway to travel from one side to another, and it goes from right underneath the Han River to the bottom of Suwon, which used to be in Taishan mission, but now it's a part of the Seoul South mission. And so there are 6 zones. We're kind of stacked like right across each other. It's mostly city. There's a little bit of countryside when you get further south, but up in the Seoul Incheon area, it's all big city, big apartments, big roads, lots of people. Public transportation is really good in Korea, super good. You can get everywhere by buses and by the subways. We don't ride bikes. We don't drive. We just walk and take buses. The mission home is in Songpa, and it's right southeast of the Han River. And so it's kind of like near to the outskirts of the mission, so it's not quite central. But yeah, it's a beautiful area. I like Songpa. The weather is a lot like Utah's. We have the 4 seasons that right now it's winter over in Korea, but it's very humid there. And because we're on a peninsula, and so we're surrounded by both sides of the ocean, and can be very cold in the winter, and it's very hot in the summer. And they also have winds during the winter that come down from the Siberian mountains, and so they call them sword winds in Korea, and they will like cut you to your center. They're very cold. It's mostly big city. It's not really, there's a few mountains and a few hills, but nothing like really big. Well, I'm from Utah, so to me mountains are mountains, but in Korea they're mostly hills that they call mountains. But yeah, just a big city. There's forest. It's really green when you're getting to the countryside. It's really pretty. I love Korea. I love the look of Korea. It's beautiful. Actually, the Seoul South mission is a lot of residential area. It's a lot of where people who work in Seoul, they live in like the Seoul South boundary. So like Incheon and right below the Seoul River and like in Suwon and all that. So a lot of it isn't a whole lot of touristy spots. It's a lot of like places you live. I mean, there's Gangnam Style, the song. So Gangnam is in our mission, and so that's a huge shopping district. A lot of our mission is a lot of shopping areas. And so if you like to go shopping, it's a good place to go. But a lot of the big tourist sites aren't really in our mission. They're all up in the Seoul mission. And so we don't really get to go see a whole lot. I mean, there's a few there's like a Buddhist temple in Gangnam that's really cool. And just a few places. I know like Suwon has a traditional village, but for P-days, I like to do crazy things on P-days because I was like, come on, we're only in Korea once. And my companions be like, oh, I'm tired. I'm like, you can sleep when you go home. Let's go do something. So like, we would look around in like our area. Like my last area was right by a mountain. And so we went hiking a lot, and we went to a butterfly park, and we just did crazy things and went exploring. They had like the city museum, and I would ask members like in this area, like, is there something fun to do, or is there something interesting to do? And members were pretty helpful, and they would give you things. But our mission is very small, and so I mean, if you wanted to go to Gangnam on a P-day, I mean, I lived on the opposite side of the mission. It only took me about 45 minutes to an hour to get there, so it's not that bad. Like, if you want to travel within there. Koreans, they're very respectful. They're very polite, generally speaking, and they're very open's not quite the right word, because they don't really want to like learn about new things, but they're very polite to what you do believe. I don't know, you bow a lot in Korea. So I'd be walking down the street just bowing, oh, annyeonghaseyo, and just walking down the street. They're very family family's focused and very family centered. When you get close to people, you will call them like big brother, big sister, little sister, depending on how your age is very important. And so a lot of the times people will ask in your first conversation with them, how old are you? And in America, it's kind of rude to be like, how old are you? But in Korea, you're like, oh, I'm 23. And they're like, oh, you're so young. And then, or you can call them big sister or whatever. But as missionaries, we'd always call people just brother and sister. Generally, we wouldn't, they have specific names for big brother and big sister, but we called it like a general term. And we would address everybody by that term as missionaries. Yeah, they're very respectable, they love to eat on the floor, sleep on the floor, do everything on the floor. So you'll probably sleep on a mat in your house on the floor and probably eat on the floor. You will eat on the floor with like little small tables that they eat at. They love to be outside. Like it's a lot of people don't have cars. It's a very close centered cities. And so there's a lot of people outside all the time. You'll see grandmas and grandpas. They have like little parks where like they're like designated for them to like sit and just like hang out all day. And so they're very much outside a lot of the time. And there's like exercise equipment like on the side of the road that you can just go and exercise on. And so go and talk to people and all that. So there's a lot of people outside. They're very active people. And even like the old grandmas and grandpas, you see them out on the streets and they're still working and they're still doing things. And they're very productive, busy people. They like to be busy. And so like for school, like Korean students will go to school from like 7 in the morning to like 10 o'clock at night. So they're very dedicated to what they do. Korean food is delicious. I love Korean food. It's really spicy. They eat a lot of kimchi, which is like fermented spicy cabbage, which sounds disgusting, but it's really, really, really good. But it took me a couple of transfers to really get used to the flavor of it. But now I just love it. Korean food, they love red pepper paste. They love red pepper powder. They love rice. They love seaweed. Eggs. They eat eggs and everything. Super good. Oh, I love Korean food. Probably the craziest thing I ate was they eat dog there in Korea, but I never ate it. I refused to eat it. But I've had pig intestines and I've had this spicy, it's like one of the spiciest foods in Korea. It's like the spicy octopus fried rice thing, and it's really spicy, and octopus is really rubbery. Yeah, they like fish eggs a lot too. I like the small ones, but not the big ones. Yeah, Korean food. Korean is a hard language. I still don't feel like I fully really understand. I have a really good understanding of people. I listen a lot, but speaking for me can be very difficult. The thing that helped me the most with learning the language is just actually going out and just speaking to people, like picking out like 5 words that I want to learn that day and like going out and making sure I say them at some point on the street, because we talk to people all day long because there's so many people outside. And so we would just like really trying to be actively engaged in learning Korean. And when I'm not talking to somebody, I would try to like eavesdrop on people's conversations and just listen and try to get a basic understanding. And sometimes on the street, I'd even like people would say something and I'd be like, I'm sorry, like I'm learning Korean, like could you tell me that word? Could you write that down? And most of the time, like Koreans are very friendly and they want to help you, and they think that as an American that you're learning Korean is very impressive to them. And so just that fact alone, they're very happy to help you learn the language. The members are very helpful. The people on the street, your investigators, like they understand that Korean is a hard language and they want to help you learn it. And so I feel like just using those resources helped me a lot. Just like I would say it all the time on the streets, be like, I'm sorry. It's like, I don't know that word. Can I look it up for a second? Like if we weren't like in like a deep spiritual moment, I'd be like, let's stop. What's that word? And so then I could fully understand what they were saying. Yeah, the language is different in many different ways from English. You think English and start thinking backwards, and you're starting to get close to what Korean is. And so the sentence structure and the grammar structure is very different than what I was used to. And they also have different forms of address depending on who you're talking to. So you have like a high form, a low form, middle form, etc. There's a few more but we mostly speak in middle. In the MTC they teach you high form, but then you go to into country and everybody only speaks in middle form, and you're like, wait a second, I don't know how to speak in middle form. And so that was a little bit interesting to get adjusted to the different levels of language, because I would address, but like in a lesson or in like a talk at church, you would speak in high form, but in like on the street, I would only speak to people in middle form. And so it's just like this weird balance of trying to like figure out forms. And as missionaries, we never spoke in low form because that's a very casual, very intimate form of language. And so we wouldn't speak in that until, well, ever, because we were missionaries and representatives of Jesus Christ. I just remember I was with my one of my Korean companions, and I was telling her that we should go write some letters on P-Day. But instead of saying letter, which is pyeongi, I said pyeongi, which is toilet. And she died laughing for like 3 weeks. And so that's the one I remember the most, just because she kept on bringing it up over and over. So my mission was amazing. I mean, everybody will say that about their mission, that like the ability that we have to see people's lives change is incredible. Like to see it, like you get like first row seats to like the best show on earth, and it's incredible to see people's lives change. On my mission, I didn't have a baptism or what you would call, like, maybe people would say that that's not very like a big success, but I saw people like go from like point A to point B, and even though they didn't take that final step towards baptism, I knew that eventually like those people will accept the gospel, and I have faith that they will. And there was this one woman in my last area that she was one of the biggest blessings, not only in my life, but I felt like that we were a huge blessing in her life. She was going through an incredibly difficult time in her life with her husband and with her job, and she was trying to get a visa to go back to America to work. And she was this incredible woman who had this amazing faith in Jesus Christ, and she had believed in Jesus Christ her entire life. And whenever we met with her, we just felt his love for her so strongly. And we worked with this woman for 6 months. We met with her every single week. And just to see how her life changed, how she became happier, how she felt, I just saw that joy start coming into her face. And I remember my very last Sunday in the mission field, I was invited all my investigators to come to church. And that day, this sister, she came in for the very first time. She had family issues where she couldn't come to church because her brother was a pastor, and so she had to go to his church instead on Sundays. But my very last Sunday, I was singing in church and saying goodbye to the Lord, and surprisingly, I was very surprised when she walked into the chapel that morning, and I cried like the entire, after they all left and after the meeting was over, I turned to my companion and just broke down into tears. And I had never felt so much joy and so much happiness in one person coming to church before, and making that one small decision to come closer to Jesus Christ. And missionaries are still working with her, as far as I know. But I think that there are people on our missions. I mean, I taught quite a few people on my mission, and I felt like each person, even though they never quite made it to the level of baptism, even though I'm still praying that they will, that we still make a difference in their lives. That no matter what happens, no matter how hard you try, they still have their agency. I feel like that was the hardest thing for me on my mission. It was like, oh, people have their agency. Now I know how God must feel whenever I make stupid decisions. But I just loved being a part and seeing these people and seeing how they came closer to Jesus Christ. And I think through them coming closer to Jesus Christ, I came closer to Jesus Christ. And it just was the most, I would say every single week in my emails home that I'm the luckiest girl on the planet, because I get to to be with these incredible Korean people and to help them and to love them. And that's all I feel towards them. It's just this huge amount of love towards Korea and towards the people. And I never thought when I started my mission that I would feel so much love and so much joy from serving these people, but it became that way, and it was the best thing ever. In my first area, whenever I had just become a junior companion, my trainer had just left, and we were teaching this man in the church, and he was probably 80 something, and he came to church one day and just showed up out of the blue. And we didn't really think he really had that much interest in the church. We didn't really know anything. My companion was that much older than me in the mission, and she was also American. Well, she was Canadian, but she didn't speak Korean much better than I did. And we both kind of struggled, and we're just like, okay, well, we don't really know if this is what this man wants. And so we gave him a Book of Mormon and invited him to come back. And the next week he came back, and we were so surprised. And then we've started meeting with this brother starting that week. And then the next week we had set up an appointment with him right after church. We had also set up an appointment with another investigator right after church because we figured that one of them just wouldn't show up. But lucky us, both of them did. And so I remember I was in my third month as a missionary, didn't speak Korean at all, and my senior companion turns to me and she's like, "You're going to go teach this 80-year-old man the first lesson." And I was like, "What? Are you serious?" And so I went and I did. I had my members, and I had an older gentleman from our ward and his daughter with us too. And so we were teaching this old man, and I felt like my Korean was absolutely terrible. I was like, I don't know, because I just couldn't speak. And somehow I taught the first lesson. We ended with prayer, and I felt the Spirit, but I didn't know how much he understood or what really went on, because I kind of said things and then my members would translate for me. And then the next week I was telling my senior companion, I'm like, we should teach the first lesson again. I was like, I'm not entirely sure if he really understood it. So we go the next week and we start teaching him the first lesson again. He stops in the middle of the lesson. He's like, "Why are you teaching this to me? Sister Watkins already taught it to me, and I already know it's true." And at that moment, I felt the power that comes from the Spirit, and that this work wasn't about me. It wasn't about my language. It wasn't about the fact that I could speak as much Korean as a 2-year-old. It was that Heavenly Father uses us as His tools to help us progress His work. And I think from that point forward, I never really, I studied and I worked hard on my language. But I knew that when push came to shove, and that I really needed Korean, it would be there. And what I couldn't say, the Spirit could say for me. I feel like that was the most powerful lesson that I learned as a young missionary that influenced me. And it was just a miracle just to see that gift of tongues, or this gift of this man's understanding that he was able to understand. And it was just a blessing to be there. So being a sister missionary, I feel like it was hard for me to go shopping in Korea because I didn't know how it was different than America, or what I needed. So, but as I went along my mission, I was like, oh, that would have been good to have, or that wouldn't have been good to have. In the summer, I wish I had more shirts and blouses that didn't need undershirts, because it's very hot there, and I wanted to wear as little amount of clothing as I possibly could. And then it also says in your missionary pamphlet to bring an umbrella, but they sell umbrellas there for $1 on the street. And so I just say buy it there, and when it breaks, just buy a new one, because that's what we did all the time. Or we'd be out because they have monsoon season, and so umbrellas break all the time. And so just getting things really cheap, because they'll just get replaced really easily. For shoe sizes, I know that I never had this problem because I wear size 8 in shoes, but I know other sisters had bigger feet, and they only make up to size 8. So if you have a bigger size shoe than size 8, you probably should make sure you get your shoes in America. and a lot of their clothes are also free sizes. So, and they're made for smaller, petite Asian women. And so if you have broader shoulders or you don't fit like a smaller size, like the shirt I'm wearing right now is Korean and it fits fairly well, but they're all generally just one size fits all. And so you go and it's like, oh, do you have this in a large? It's like, oh, just one size. That's all you get. The monsoon season is having, you're just gonna get wet. I know they allowed backpacks in my mission, but I know that they were getting rid of them as I was leaving. So I don't really know what to do about like a side bag, but I had a side bag that was made of leather, and when it got wet, it would stain my clothes, which wasn't very good. Dry cleaning is cheap, but you know, you don't want to spend that much on dry cleaning. So just like a bag that won't dye your clothes, or if it gets wet, or things that can get ruined, or I don't know. I went through so many clothes and went through so many shoes on my mission because we walk everywhere. And so I went through one pair of the really nice expensive ones you buy here, and then I just bought cheap shoes the rest of my mission and just wore those out until they were gone. I went through about maybe 4 or 5 pairs on my mission, but they weren't the best quality either. So in the winter, my companions and I would wear pants under our skirts with our boots because our boots would hit our knees, our skirts would go below. So we wore like fleece lined pants like underneath because it's really cold. And yeah, just staying warm, big deal. I wore a hat that doesn't not like a crocheted hat because the winds are really bad. That like a crocheted hat will just be like nothing. And so like something that actually has like substance and like form to it that will keep your head actually warm. And I think gloves too, because a lot of the times, because in Korea it's rude to hand things to people with a gloved hand or like a hand that's covered. And so I'd always have to take my gloves off. And then to grab things. So I actually bought those mittens that go through your jacket. And so I would just like take it off and it would just like hang there as I would be like handing things to people, and then just put it back on, because then I wasn't losing gloves. I always knew exactly where they were because they were attached and together. And so I thought that those were very helpful and very nice to have for winter time too, because it was very cold and you needed something on your hands. So they have a monsoon season in Korea that's about 3 weeks long, in July, June-ish, sometime in the middle of like beginning of summer. It just gets really wet all the time, and we would just come home and like the back of our skirts were completely soaked from like kicking up water. And I know we bought water shoes, so our feet would just stay fairly dry and ish. So there's just a lot of rain, but it's only for a couple weeks of the year, and then the rest of it's pretty. But it's always fun with an umbrella trying to talk to people over the loud, and people are driving past on the roads and it's very loud and you're like, hello, and sometimes it doesn't work. But Korea's actually really safe. Like I don't think I've ever felt safer like in a big city before than I have in Korea. And crime is very low there. I think the worst problem I ever had with things was I had some run-ins with some drunk men, but I mean, you just get out of there, and I don't know, nothing really bad. I had a man once grab my companion's arm and like refused to let go, but like I like had to like pry his fingers like off of her, and then we like ran away. But I think that was like probably the scariest moment that like happened on my mission. I felt very safe there. Like I know that like thievery is very low. Like my companions and I would joke and be like, you could leave something out all night and no one would even touch it. For the most part, no one, like if that ever happened, no one would. Like they're very honest people, and they're very, I don't know, I never had a problem with crime, and I served in one of the big cities too, so I felt safe there. So if you just got called to the Korea Seoul South mission, I have to say you are one of the luckiest people in the entire world, and I am so jealous that you get to go there, because Korea is wonderful. The people are amazing. The food is incredible. Really spicy at first, but you get used to it. And if I had any advice to give to you to go to Korea, just go with an open heart and an open mind. I mean, there will be things there and foods there and people there that may not quite equal to what you think of, or like like really be like what you had experienced before. It's a completely different world. It's completely different culture, different people, different everything. But just going there with just an open heart and an open mind will allow you to love the Korean people, and they are amazing and they deserve all the love that we can give them. And I feel like just loving people, like members, less actives. There's a lot of less actives in Korea, and they just really need love. And if that's all we can do for people, just love them. And even the people we meet on the streets, if they just feel Christ's love through us, and that's the only difference that we make, then I think that that's enough. That we can just little bit by little bit help people feel Christ's love. But if you're watching this and you'll go to Korea, you'll love it. I don't know how you could not. I think my greatest skill that I learned from my mission would be just having faith in God and like just going out and doing things. Because sometimes we can talk about things all day, but until we go out and do something about it, it doesn't mean anything. And so sometimes we can talk a lot, but then at the end of the day, we just have to go out and do. Just going out and trusting that whatever you do, it'll work out okay. I know this gospel is true. I know it with every fiber of my being. And if I didn't know it before my mission, I know it now. Elder Holland came and spoke to us in the MTC, and he told us, he was like, if you have one convert on your mission, it had better be you. And I felt that way through my mission, that God wasn't only shaping the people around me, but he was shaping me. And I learned powerful lessons on my mission that I hope will influence me for the rest of my life. I know that Jesus Christ is our Savior. I know that he's the Redeemer of the world. And I know that through him, we can be happy and we can receive salvation and we can help others to find that happiness. And there was a point in my mission that it was very difficult for me. It was very hard to be a missionary. And I didn't know quite why I was there anymore. And I didn't know what I should be doing anymore. And I was reading in Philippians, and in chapter 4, verse 13, it says, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. And I would say that to myself every single day. I'm like, it's okay, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. And eventually, it didn't become something that I just said to myself. It became a way of living, and that Jesus Christ became the center of my life. And it was the most incredible thing, not only to see the change in other people, but to see the change that came over myself. And I am so grateful that I am a disciple of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and I was called of him to declare his word among his people, that they might have everlasting life. And being a missionary was probably the best experience, not only like in my life, but for my life. And I know that it was through the experiences that I had that I was able to learn of Jesus Christ and to fully become his disciple. And I know this church is true. I know that Joseph Smith is a prophet of God. And I know that God only wants us to be happy. And the way we can be happy is through living his gospel and by helping others to receive that gospel. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.